Hi, everybody, and welcome to Drop Shot, where the love for tennis meets the thrill of competition. My name is Michele Dinella, and I will be your host and fellow tennis enthusiast. Join me on my personal tennis journey from the clay courts of southern Italy to the bustling streets of Washington, D.C. In each episode, my guests and I will share personal experiences, we'll comment on Grand Slams, analyze players and stats, and even offer tips on gear and apparel. Whether you are a seasoned pro or maybe just picking up a racket, sit back and get ready to serve, volley, and ace your way through the fascinating world of tennis. Hello, listeners, and welcome to our next episode of Drop Shot. Today, we are going to the movies, so grab your popcorn, sit back, because we are going to talk about the tennis movie. I'm talking about Challengers, of course, directed by the master of sensual storytelling, Luca Guadagnino. This film is a captivating explanation of desire, competition, and power dynamics set against the backdrop of a high stakes tennis tournament. Joining me for today's episode, there is a dear friend of mine and fellow tennis enthusiast named Nicole. Hi, Nicole, and welcome to the Drop Shot podcast.
Hi, Michele. Thanks so much for having me. Great being here.
All right, the pleasure is ours. And so let's delve right into the commentary for this movie. And something that you should know is that Nicole and I play tennis on a weekly basis, I would say, but we did not go to watch the movie together. And we did not have a chance to comment on it yet, apart from a few words that we exchanged off mic. So this is going to be an interesting conversation. I can already sense that we have diverging thoughts over some things. And this is a movie that creates a lot of debate, in my opinion. And I'm sure that you guys will have very, very different, sometimes polarized opinions, because some people hated it, some people loved it. So let's see where in the spectrum Nicole and I are. And so the first question that I had in mind for you, Nicole, is what were your expectations before actually going to the cinema to watch this movie?
So, I think that I've seen the trailer for this movie so many times. I was going to the movies, and each time they would play the Challengers trailer. And overall, I felt like this movie got so much press. Like, it was all over the place. And I mean, it promised to be the sexiest movie ever made. And I feel like it almost lived up to the promise, but it wasn't as sexy as it could have been, though it was really sexy. And then my friend went to see it and he was like, Nicole, you have to see this movie. And he just watched it and he was like, do you want to just go see it tomorrow? And I was like, you're going to watch this back to back essentially? And he's like, yeah. So that was kind of my setup for this movie. So I was expecting something really sexy, but honestly, not too deep. How about you?
Yeah, I completely agree with that observation. I believe that there's not so many good movies around, and there's not many tennis movies around. There hasn't been for a very long time. And this is a moment where tennis is really trendy, in my opinion. I don't know. I don't know about the United States, but in Italy, for sure, there is some kind of frenzy. I see from my Instagram stories, from what I see, the people that I know in Italy are actually going outside more than they used to and playing tennis. Some people that I would never tell play tennis are taking it up. So I'm glad to see that interest around the movement. And this, I believe that this movie came out at the right time, at the best time possible. But I believe it's the same for the United States, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. So it's the combination of these two factors: the fact that there's not much around at the movies, and the fact that people want more tennis and want to play, want to see more tennis, want to know more about tennis. That's probably also why our listeners are here right now. So, what do you think about that?
Yes, definitely. I didn't even say tennis when I was like why I wanted to watch this, but definitely since we play and we play a lot, like a few times a week, that was part of the reason. It was like tennis meets sex. But I do think, and then I'm curious to hear your thoughts, like tennis was really the backdrop of this movie. And I do think that kind of the romance, the drama, what took, you know, center stage. But still, like, I think if you play tennis and if you just enjoy tennis, like, that made it extra fun.
Well, I still believe that this is a movie about tennis, and this is a movie about um, an athlete's life and the pressure that comes from it. But we will have plenty of time to touch upon that. I wanted to focus more on the trailer because I just like you, I was expecting something a lot more sexual from that what minute and a half of trailer. And just like you, I had been going to the movies and seeing this trailer all the time, and I was getting hyped up because I was telling everyone, "Oh, finally there is a movie about tennis, and it has Zendaya in it." And I thought, and I started reading that she was taking lessons from Andre Agassi. So my expectations had been building up, and at the same time, I went to see the movie kind of late after 1 month that had been out, and so I had already started overhearing some reviews, and they were, for the most part, bad. So those expectations that I had hyped up, I lowered them before going to see this movie. So I guess that evens things out for on some level. But generally, a rule that I have when I go to watch something is to know the least that I can. I try to not read anything about the plot, to read as few interviews possible, just because I want to go there with a clean sheet. And that's what I did for this movie, even though I knew that people were talking about it and not in an endearing way. But something that struck me for sure in the trailer was that scene. Was the scene that probably all of you listeners have watched, and I'm referring to the scene where Zendaya is in the middle of what we would call a freeway kiss. I don't want to call it a threesome, but that's what it suggested to the audience fantasy. And that's probably why we all thought we were going to watch something a lot more sexual than it actually was. And I'm glad it wasn't that much of a sexual movie. But I agree with you, Nicole, where you say that there was a lot of sexual tension inside and throughout the whole movie. But that tension that the ancient Greek would call eros. So the power of love and the power of passion also matches what athletes do on a regular basis, where when they go out on the court and play tennis and they want to win tennis, there is always this dual presence of competition and passion. And this is, in my opinion, what this movie is all about. These two things are a recurring theme, and as I said, we'll have a chance to develop our thoughts around them. But let's just give some context to the people who haven't seen the movie for some reason and are just here to hear about it, to hear thoughts. We will try not to make too many spoilers, but we want to talk about it. So the movie is about mainly two male tennis players, Art and Patrick. And you can see a few flashbacks from different times of their life. And basically, it starts when they are teenagers and they are very good friends, I would say, best friends, inseparable friends. And then at a certain point of their life, while they start playing tournaments competitively. There is a girl uh, that comes into their life and into their tennis career, named Tashi, which is interpreted by Zendaya, and she rocks their both of their words because they both want to um, get laid with her. And it's very funny because they are so goofy when when they're trying to courtesy her and try to get her to their room. And this is the scene that leads up to what we were talking about in the trailer. So the movie revolves around this freeway relationship, and in the future, after this flashback, we see how Tashi spends part of her life and part of her personal life with either Patrick before and Art afterwards in an intimate relationship as they perform in their tennis career, because before Patrick is the stronger one, and he proves that after winning a game against Art. And before the game, Tashi would tell them, hey, I'm going to be the girlfriend, or I'm going to date whoever wins this game. So Patrick wins, and actually Tashi becomes his girlfriend. But then they break up for some reason. We don't want to spoil the whole movie. And Tashi afterwards becomes not only the girlfriend of Art, but her wife, and they have a child together. And so it's a constant back and forth in this three-way relationship, and it's all about these three characters. So I agree with you, Nicole. This is more of a relationship movie, uh, and tennis is on the background. But I still believe that the pressure of the competition is always, always, always there, and you can feel it. I don't know what you think about it.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I didn't even frame it really as that big of a sports movie, but I really like what you said about it showing the life of someone who does competitive sports for a living, and how it affects your relationships. Though I think, and I don't know if you'd agree, that there was kind of a one dimensionality to her relationship with both Art and Patrick. Like, it kind of felt that they were foils of each other. And so you had Art, who was this sweet, loyal puppy dog almost. And then you had Patrick, who was kind of more of a challenge. And that's also how they played tennis, right? But I mean, they started off playing doubles together and they just complemented each other, worked really well. And then she kind of had her first choice between the two of them. But I also wanted to go back to kind of the articles that came out because I did read some. Um, like I read some New York Times articles about the movie, and I just liked one of the descriptions. It was fizzy, lightly sexy, an enjoyable tease of a movie. So I feel like the whole time you're just kind of being teased by her relationships, teased by um, the actual tennis happening. Like we can dissect some of the actual tennis play, and I want to hear more about how Zendaya was trained and everything because I feel like that's also for people who are interested in tennis, maybe something worth talking about.
Yeah, I believe it was a little bit of an overkill to hire Andre Agassi to train Zendaya. But that's fascinating for sure. I've seen a couple videos of that, but that's nothing too special, I would say. Um, I would call it more than simply a tease. I would call it something like pressure, and that's the pressure that all athletes, when they play on a competitive level and a professional level, have. And that's what also Zendaya's character represents in this movie. She is psychopathic on some disturbing levels in this movie, because she changes her mind so quickly. Uh, she changes relationships so quickly depending on whoever is winning in that very moment. And I believe that keeping up this parallel with with ancient Greek mythology, she represents Nike, or how they call it in America, Nike, the goddess of victory, because in the original myth, Nike was blindfolded, and she only went with the winners. So that's exactly what Zendaya embodies in this movie. And I really like to read things using that key, using that perspective. Because if you think about it, this movie could also be the relationship between just two people, between just two friends, between just two challengers. In this case, Art and Patrick, that start together from pretty much the same level, and that take very, very different paths in their lives. Patrick is kind of broke, and he's not doing well professional wise in tennis. And Art, on the other side, has his face on the rackets and on the walls of the cities. So he made it, but it's two faces of the same coin, of what it means to be a professional tennis player. And all that Zendaya's character represents is that character, is that pressure, and the fact that she goes with the winner is only a metaphor for victory. And I want to go back to something that Yannick Sinner was saying when he won the Miami Open, I believe. Um, that he was, and we quoted him on the first episode of our podcast. I think we were talking about the Madrid Open with Stefano. He said that he wasn't going to participate to any of the fancy events that he was invited to. He was even invited by the president of the Republic of Italy, but he didn't go. He was invited to festivals, etc. And he said, I'm already thinking of my next tournament, because victory is something ephemeral, is something that is not going to stay with me for my whole career. And that is something extremely valuable, especially if you hear it from such a young player like Sinner, that is in his early 20s. But I want to know what you think of this parallel.
Sure. I mean, I do think that this movie was also very much a coming of age movie, and you see them, they're what, like 18 years old, they're playing in the juniors tournament for the US Open. Um, and that's how they meet and they bond over their love of tennis. But I wouldn't go so far as to say that Zendaya is psychopathic, and I'm wondering if there's a double standard here because she is a woman and she wanted it really, really badly. And I don't know how many details we're giving here, but I think like from the trailer you can see that she has a career changing, life altering accident, right? So her way of keeping her eye on the prize and being able to continue being amongst winners was to coach. But I think that there was still like feeling in her relationships with these men. Like, yeah, it did kind of seem like she was using them as chess pieces to live out a life that she couldn't have anymore because she couldn't be the one playing. But I do think that she also took joy in kind of shaping the way these men were playing. She bonded with them over tennis. And there was a little bit more to the relationships than just tennis. Or what do you think?
I believe that saying something like if you don't win tomorrow, I will leave you can be classified on the
But
verge of
okay,
psycho.
sure, but listen, like I think he said that because that's what he needed
That's what he
to
needed.
hear.
Yes, yes.
And she didn't want to say it. And I think like the whole reason like she went behind his back and did that secret deal with Patrick um, was because in a way she was afraid of the consequences, right? Which shows some level of deeper feeling.
Yeah, that shows affection for sure. I don't know if it shows love, at least not in a conventional way. But I can agree with you on some level. And they say that when you have strong feelings for a character, even good or bad, it means that the actor is doing a great job. And I think it's a good segue to talk about Zendaya's performance in this movie. But to stay on top of that, I just wanted to add that I really believe that Tashi is in love with neither Patrick or Art. She's in love with tennis. She goes wherever tennis goes. She goes wherever victory goes, and that can be a quality, but they can also be a curse as well, because you are destined to never be happy and satisfied in your life. And you see that from the fact that her life with Art, despite they are probably millionaires, despite their faces are everywhere, despite they have this beautiful child together, they're not happy in the movie. You can tell that they're not. So this is just my humble opinion, and it's also speculation over things. But it also entails a further reflection over what sports on a professional level are. Um, they are very fast. They are something where you are on top of the world for one day, for 1 week, for 1 month, for 1 year of your life, but you can fall behind really, really fast. And you can fall from really, really high, and that hurts a lot. So that's my take on things. And that's something that, again, the ancient Greeks would call hubris, which is a form of sin. um, they said, for example, Ulysses made a sin of hubris when he wanted to go outside of the to see what's outside of the Mediterranean Sea, when he wanted to go out in the Atlantic, because the Greeks believed that the that the Mediterranean Sea was the end of the world and there was nothing beyond that. So it's about always wanting to go beyond, always thinking that there is something beyond. That is a necessary characteristic for someone who plays sports on a professional level, but at the same time can be a curse. And we were talking about it in the Nadal episode, asking ourselves, what are these professionals going to do the day after they finish playing tennis, the day after they retire? Nadal, Cristiano Ronaldo, people like this, I believe that they devote and they sacrifice their whole life to that single extent, and afterwards they probably take at least some time to understand what to do next. But you can correct me if I'm wrong here.
No, I think you're right. I do agree with you that Tashi's main passion in life is tennis. She lives it, breathes it. And I think that the fact that her husband wanted to retire, wasn't really looking to win big, to continue this lifestyle, really just turned her off. But I also think that it's deeper to kind of how they made her feel. Like, I do think that we need to talk about the scene in the bedroom, the other scene in the bedroom when Patrick and Tashi are fighting. So this is when Tashi starts Stanford. She's doing long distance with Patrick, but they're not really in a defined relationship, but they do clearly like each other. And then Art's kind of lurking around, like he clearly just really loves her, but it's more of a puppy dog kind of love and extreme fascination. But you can tell that he would be the one who, I don't know, really listens to her, validates her, takes care of her. And Patrick is kind of more of the riskier option. And so they're fighting, and um, Patrick essentially says, like, I'm not a member of your fan club. And she gets extremely upset. So I think for her, it's also like that ego boost that she searches in these men. And he's like, no, we're equals. And then they have like that fight, and then it moves into the big scene when she's playing the game. And kind of we see after that, after her accident, that um, Patrick has to take a back seat and she can't stand him anymore. And I think like subconsciously, like that accident got linked to their fight. And then that's when Art swoops in and they start their relationship. And you see, that she made, one could say, probably the healthier choice, the safer choice. But at the same time, I was left thinking, like, can't you have both someone who is your equal but admires you? But then the power dynamics get even more complicated, right? Because she is actually her husband's coach. So overall, like, the dynamics in their relationship are all over the place because you're dating somebody who essentially is like, I need you to win. And he starts losing big time. Like, that's why he is signed up for this Grand Slam in the first place by her.
Listen to this. Let's see things from this perspective. I believe that the injury that Tashi has right after that argument that she has with Patrick is a crucial moment in the movie. And why is that? Because she understands through time that she's not able to play tennis at a professional level, how she was dreaming to, how she had been dreaming to. And therefore, she chooses to keep living that dream through someone else, in this case, Art. She believes that he can be a champion. She molds him into a champion because he didn't have that mindset to become a champion. She gives it to him because she had it herself. She, apparently from what we see in the movie, she was a very promising player. She had a very, very decisive style of playing. We see her scream very loud on the court when she wins. We see her destroy mentally her opponent in the junior league when she plays in Stanford. So it's kind of this living tennis vicariously through another person that is probably the seed of what not works, what doesn't work in the relationship with Patrick first and with Art afterwards. Probably she would have become a great tennis player with that mindset if she applied the same mindset to herself and not to someone else.
Sure, but also what I found interesting was that remember that scene on the beach when she says that she doesn't just want to be a tennis player and that's why she's going to Stanford? Because she made that choice early on in her career not to do what Patrick was doing, for example, which was to go and play in tournaments and try to make it big. She did want to go and major in something completely different. So I found that really interesting that, yes, like I agree with you, especially when we see her as an adult, married to Art, training him. She's clearly living vicariously through him. She wants to win. But I did think that she had somewhat different aspirations at one point, and then she just increasingly turned into this more hardened, intense, we're going to win coach as the movie progressed. But I did feel like there was like a different version of life that she had in mind. And then she realized that she was put on this earth to play tennis, but then cruelly that was taken away from her.
Yeah, I believe those are two facets of the same coin. There is probably a lot of resentment, and probably the the main issue with Art's tennis and his crisis is that Tashi and him do not want to win at the same level. Probably Tashi wants him to win more than he wants to. He probably wants to retire. He mentions it. He's old enough, and he's probably done with tennis professionally. He wants to move on and do other things, but she's not ready. So that's another couple dynamic that I believe a lot of people in the audience will be able to relate to. But let's stay um, on that and let's talk about the elephant in the room, which I believe is the performance by Zendaya in this movie. I believe that it's a coming of age for her as well, this movie, because she was able to perform in a very mature way. She has come so far as an actress, and she's still in her 20s. And that's something that we have to recognize. I believe she really reached her maturity as an actor, and you can tell that from how she performs the same role, the same character, but at different ages. And that's something really difficult to do because your character is aging, but you are living in the present. And so it's all about the way, yes, about the way you dress. And we see her in the present of the movie. We see her wearing like diva clothes in this challengers cheap tournament, and that's a funny paradox. But at the same time, it's also about the way you you act and how your personality evolves. And I believe Zendaya did a great job at that. I don't know if you agree with me.
I would agree. I mean, again, I don't think this is a movie that is asking itself to be taken too seriously, and I think that she performed how she needed to perform, like to uh, be someone who definitely is sexy, and you see like her going from like someone who is completely coveted by these two young boys, like when she's young, to like someone who's more hardened, like this coach, that they're still completely pining over. And I think I do agree with you. I think she does like that cross from playing someone who is 18 to someone probably in their 30s, right? Very well. I don't think this is her first like really serious role, because I mean in Euphoria, for example, I do think she depicted um, drug addiction extremely well. And I think that the Dune movie is also like she plays a completely different character, but also you see some of like the kind of more hardened, strong female role, right? But I think like what she did in this movie, it was kind of being able to do something a little lighter, but in like a very powerful way.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And you use the term to define her in this movie. You called her sexy. And this is actually a conversation, almost a debate that I had with my wife right after seeing this movie, because she claims, always like to comment on actors. So that's something that we do on a regular basis, and on their looks. Um, but she was very convinced that, in her opinion, Zendaya is not sexy because she looks too young still. And so that makes her unsexy in this movie. I'm sure that some men would argue with that, because she does have these moments where she looks very innocent, and these other moments where she's a boss girl, and that can be sexy. I don't think personally that she's particularly sexy in this movie, but I do think that she is seductive, which is something similar but different on some level. She's seductive, especially at the start, because she's the shiny object that everyone wants to get to. And that's exactly how this rivalry between Art and Patrick starts. And that's actually how they stop being friends. And I really believe that in this movie, Zendaya plays the part not only of Tashi, but she plays the part of victory in sports. So that was just something to further my point. And I don't know if you believe in this distinction between sexy and seductive, or if I'm talking too much philosophy here.
No, no. I mean, I do agree with you. I personally, I would disagree with you and your wife. I think that she was really sexy, but also because she was a winner, and that's what was so attractive. Like she was the best. Like she won the juniors singles of the U.S. Open, and that was part of the attraction, the spark. But I also think that um, we see her do just like a more mature film here, where she gets to show off like her um, body, and like really just be like a healthy, like young, like winner, really. So no, I would disagree with you there, but I do think like I like how you're weaving in um, like the victory narrative here, and you said that she was a shiny trophy. Like you do also see some of that, actually a lot of that. I think like the very fact that who gets to go on a date with her becomes um, like a result of who wins the tennis match. I mean, that's kind of like gamifying romance and dating to a whole new degree. And I think like throughout the movie, you see the boys just competing for her, like the whole, even at the end or uh, before when they were talking about like, oh, did you actually sleep with her? And they develop like that hand sign. Like she does kind of become like something that you have to win to prove almost your manliness, your worth, but also I think like conquer somebody who is really, really, really good at tennis. Like by winning over her, it's like you become the better tennis player almost. So yeah, I mean, I do think she's treated as an object. I don't know if we want to go into like the whole quote of me and my little white boys. Like I think you see her flip flopping between being like an object that they covet and also somebody who has to kind of keep them in check and really be like the maturing force for them. So there's that as well.
And she loves that. That's the thing. She loves being that
Not
character.
sure. I feel like it's a lot of like responsibility and pressure, and there's a part of her that just wants to be able to relax and let go and not always have to be the winner. But she realizes like that's the dynamic in the relationship. Like it's kind of a
And
self-fulfilling prophecy.
isn't that tennis? Isn't that sports on a
That's what I'm
professional level?
saying. But like maybe if there is a moral from this movie, though I'm not sure there is one, it could be that you can't make um, sports your love life. Like the two aren't the exact same thing because it was just about uh, competition and winning and who is uh, able to be the best. And then you see, like you said, rightfully, that in terms of their personal lives, they're quite miserable. Like they're not happy.
Yeah, and the other actors, the one that plays Art, I believe he was in The Crown, interpreting Prince Charles. They do a great job. The one that plays Patrick is great at showing what the life of decade tennis player looks like. He's broke, he smells, and yeah, he's just a loser, and that's what exactly what we were saying. Uh, Victory is seductive, and winners are seductive by default, and that's just a law of nature. And Yeah, I believe that if we wanted to translate the moral of this movie, the lesson, in a more cynical way, we could say simply that tennis is a lonely sport that puts a lot of pressure on you and that makes you live a miserable life for the most part, because you are traveling the whole time, because you don't get to see your family, you don't get to spend much time with them, you have to make sacrifices, your body literally breaks and gets worn out, and that's a huge toll on a human being, I believe. So yeah, that's the payoff for being a winner. That's the toll, that you have to pay. So that's the lesson. It's a very harsh lesson, and they get so lonely that they forget that at the end of the day they are friends. And here is, I think, a good segue to get to the final scene of the movie, which is a very significant in my opinion and has a lot of meaning. um, I don't know what you think, Nicole, but I believe that in the end, after that tie break, where they sweat, where they cry, where they scream, where they try to get on top of each other, um, there is one point with that volley where they remember that after all they are friends, and probably that's what matters the most to them. And that's a little bit of a silver lining in this cynical message that I just described.
Yeah, I think actually you're right. Also, wow, we're going so deep into this movie. I didn't know this movie had such dimension. But I couldn't really, and I think a lot of people were a little puzzled by the ending because, in a way, also, in by flashing that symbol during the tiebreak, um, Patrick was communicating with Art, like he was screwing with him, like I slept with your wife, and you know, Tashi essentially made a deal with Patrick that if I sleep with you tomorrow, you will lose because Art, my husband, but also the person I'm coaching, needs to win this match to get that boost, right? But then we see um, again, like these power dynamics playing out on the court. We also didn't really talk about this, and this was a huge part of the movie, like all the homoerotic sexual tension between Art and Patrick, and you see that in their game as well. Like they're like sweating so much. There are like all these like scenes interlaced with techno being played. Um, but like it did seem that when they went in for the hug and kind of were almost like laugh crying and then like the movie just cuts like you don't even know who wins at the end, um, that it was just about yeah like their friendship and that everything is forgiven because they reached like this level of absurdity almost and remembered that what's most important is kind of their friendship. But we, again, this is pure speculation because we don't know what happens. Like the movie ends rather abruptly. It's a real cliffhanger.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's open to debate and to interpretation. If after having this deal with Tashi, after sleeping with her the night before the Challengers final, Patrick actually decides to lose, to give away the match to Art, so that he can find his confidence back, and he can access better tournaments, and get back to winning again. Or if he actually just wants to win. It seems to me, and this is just my interpretation, that letting Art know that Patrick had slept with his wife is a way that Patrick has to stimulate him to say, hey, show me some rage, show me that you want to beat me, show me that you're still the best. Because that's probably what had been lacking in Art's tennis, in the last few months and years. That's why he wasn't winning anymore, because he didn't have, that spark. He didn't have that pride, that came out of him, and making say, okay, I need to win one more match, I need to go the extra mile. Probably he was tired, just like I was saying earlier. So the interpretation that I like is that Patrick did that in order for Art to step up his game, and probably after the volley he actually won the game, but he found his friendship again with Patrick, that was already a semi gone tennis player, and he will dedicate to something else in his life. But that's just one way, one of the many ways to see this ending, and that's really what I love about this movie, that it leaves a lot of stuff open to interpretation, and it lets the facts speak for themselves. These are the consequences for a type of choice that you make throughout your life. So there is a point, as you said, describing the scene in the dorm between Patrick and Tashi, where Patrick leaves and basically he says, "You are a psycho." Basically, he says, I don't want to be with someone that only wants to be with me because I'm winning tennis games. And that's the choice he makes. But where does that bring him? To a place where he's still trying to be a professional tennis player, but he doesn't care enough to win in order to make a full salary out of it, a full living out of it. So this movie just faces you with the consequences of the choices that you can take in life. And that's how harsh it can be on this level.
Yeah, definitely. I didn't even interpret it that way, that he was being so selfless and trying to give his friend, that competitive edge back, because throughout the movie I kind of felt like he was kind of portrayed as the more charismatic one, kind of the more I'm going to push your buttons one, but also as somebody who was kind of self-centered. Uh, and I do think the fact that he became a washed up tennis player, like sleeping in his car, not even able to afford a hotel room, stealing like, or, asking for half a sandwich before his match from the woman, checking them in. Like, I kind of felt like he really needed this win. And he was also kind of on the other spectrum of desperation, where he actually did make tennis his career, his livelihood, and was also, from what I understood, on a complete losing streak. So I'm not sure, but yeah, you're right. There are so many different ways to interpret the ending. Um, like even the fact that it was kind of water under the bridge, we can be friends now, because if we go with your theory, like I know how you work really well, like we have this friendship and nothing can kind of ruin it, and let's just focus on what matters, and also what matters is tennis, and I know how to get you to play well. Like that is kind of, I think, a unique and maybe a more interesting interpretation of the end.
Yeah, and don't forget, Nicole, that we have these moments as well when one of us is feeling low energy on the courts, and the other one is like it's almost angry at them. It's like, what are you doing? Why aren't you going
Yeah.
full swing against me? We've had this conversation a few times throughout our friendship, and so I understand perfectly that dynamic. And that's the magic, I think, here of the direction. There is a little bit of Italy in this movie. The director Luca Guadagnino, you mentioned Euphoria, so here's another master. I don't know if I can call it masterpiece, but it's a really good movie about tennis, and there's not so many around. So I'm happy that it's there. I'm happy that the sport got this kind of exposure. I hope it gets more. And the atmosphere in the movie, you mentioned the music, the techno music that is like blasting in our ears the whole time, but also the photography. And I mentioned the outfits are very iconic. Is just part of this frenzy. This movie is a frenzy because it makes you feel the kind of pressure that a professional athlete must feel at all times. So, would I recommend it? Yes, absolutely. Is it the best movie in the world? I don't think so.
Yeah, like I would also recommend it. I think especially if you like tennis, if you like Zendaya, it's a no-brainer to go watch it. And it does, like when the techno is pumping and some of the scenes, like literally I was watching it with my friend, and the first bedroom scene, like you could feel like this hush in the movie theater, and then like everyone just like almost squealed when Patrick and Art kissed. And like I think like my friend and I literally just like grabbed onto each other and were like, it's happening. So it is like just a good way to spend 2 hours. I think we added a lot of depth to this movie that doesn't first meet the eye. So maybe it'd be more fun to watch with kind of this analysis. But it can also just be taken as 2 hours of just fun, you know? And I think everybody needs more of that in their life. Just like for 2 hours, go someplace and be entertained, watch, the pretty people playing tennis, sweating, like add a little drama on top. And yeah, I would also recommend it.
All right, I think we gave you listeners all of the information, even more than the information you needed. So there's only one thing that you gotta do if you haven't yet, which is go to watch Challengers. And if you like this episode, if you like this podcast, if you want to support our work here at Dropshot, make sure to follow the podcast and to leave 5 stars if you're listening on Spotify, or a full review if you are listening on an iPhone on Apple Podcast, because that helps us immensely to grow and to get to new people, new listeners, new audience, and to produce new episodes for you. So that's it for me. Thank you, Nicole, for having been my guest in this journey.
Yeah, thanks so much, Michele.
And thank you, all listeners, for bearing with us so far. And I'll see you in the next episode about the Roland Garros.